Coochie Welch, Calicchio Welch, to get some training in stock and doing PI work there for Chester Welch, Calicchio, Coochie Welch, Calicchio, and Welch. I guess there are two Welches and a Calicchio. But I got some training there, and that's when I saw UFO come out over the Great Lakes, and where we were staying at Pineview Heights Apartments. It had a little boat on the water, but there was a white light out right before it was getting dark, and it was just sitting high in the sky, and two red basketball lights came out. I don't know what. I'm sure they were bigger than that in the sky because we could see them so big, but red or amber-looking balls that came straight up. One on the left shot straight up out of this white light, and then went to the left while you're looking at it, the sky, and then one came out on the next to where that one came out and went straight up, set, and then move over to the right. So they were intelligently designed because of the way they moved, in my mind. They shot up. At first I thought it was going to be like, seeing firecrackers or something. They were really big red amber light. And then, like I said, I believe they were controlled by intelligence. And then they took off one direction and one the other. So that was interesting, and that got me wondering even more. And I went in and called 911 to see if anybody else had reported it. But that really got me started strongly of wanting to know more. But I went back to Houston and worked for Newton Schwartz, Ben Musselwhite, John O'Quinn on some high-profile PCB cases on TVA and polychlorinated biphenyls, and then Agent Orange, working with citizen soldiers and a lot of people, and then some high-profile maritime law. I remember the investigation on some of the offshore oil rigs that were created from the old Howard Hughes bridges. They had made them and they had rusted out, and a guy hooked to it, and it came loose because of the structure that he had hooked to, and all kind of cases like that. It was a lot of fun, and I was good at finding out information. I knew that, and getting to the bottom of the story. And I was told nobody ever influenced me. I have to say that. The attorneys were good about just sending me to do my job, just saying, get the facts. That's all we care about. So Newton Schwartz was good about that. Never influenced me one way or the other. He just said, get the facts. And, of course, he paid for everything. I think that's what made him well known, was he always seemed to have the money to back up a lot of these huge, big cases. But they were worth millions back then, so I guess that's where he got his money. But he came up to get me one time when I was finished doing A school in Great Lakes. Come get me. My parents did, but that was really sweet of him to come and want to pick me up. And I'll never forget that, because I didn't know who was going to pick me up or if I could get but my parents all wound up at Houston International Airport. And that was when I came after I'd gone to boot camp in Orlando and then Chicago. And then I called him once when I was over in Tokyo, and he told me about, don't you know there's a war going on, or Iraq war or whatever? I didn't know about any of that at that time, because I'd been training and all of that, and then gone over to Japan to train some more with weapons, believe it or not, even though I was a hospital corpsman, which made me arouse suspicion. But anyway, I had gone to Lowry Air Force Base before I went. After I left Orlando, I went over, I guess, while my clearance, I was told to work there while my clearance took a couple of weeks, get secret clearance. But they told me I was being cleared, waiting on my clearance. And that's when a gentleman from Germany, or at least he spoke German, he had come out and visited me at the Lowry Air Force Base. And I'm trying to put this whole story together because it's different than everybody else's. And I've asked quite a few people that have been in the military and in intelligence, so they've never heard of how this works together. My story is relatively unique. But they told me I'd have higher clearance than the President of the United States, which I didn't even know any of them existed. Or I didn't understand the clearance levels, but I was trained to know clearance levels when I went through training on handling personnel information security in the U.S. Naval Intelligence world, or in the U.S. Navy. and I went out to train some with, I went into NIS office, but when I was at, I turned that job down, by the way. I just felt like I was too trained already for that kind of work that they wanted me to do, because I'd been receiving, after I went through A school at Hospital Corps School, I went back to work there at the headquarters for the commanding officer. And at the hospital, I had a C-section because I was bleeding a lot. Not a C-section, that's when I had my fourth daughter. Placenta previa, no, that was when I had my fourth daughter. What do they call that? A partial hysterectomy, I guess one might say, where my uterus was taken out because I was bleeding all over my whites. I don't know why that's important, but it's part of my story, just to prove I was there, I guess, to those that don't believe that they can find a paper trail. There's maybe a trail for my name, Theresa J Thurmond, Thurmond, but getting the paperwork, good luck, because when I went through, I was taken down, and first of all, the goat locker forever left Houston from and MEPS, and was told about how secretive everything would be. And then again, when I went through Corps School, they took me down to the locker. I don't know what it is about going to the basement. So there must be something to do. So, but back in that time, they took me in 4 other people. There's 5 of us, and we were told we would never get a normal DD-214. There's 5 of us that were chosen to do other kind of work, and I guess intelligence work is all I can figure out. But I was all gung-ho. I was 33 by this time, and it's amazing because I learned a lot about paperwork, and at that time we used to carry around a brown looking folder with all our paperwork in it from one command to another. We'd literally carry our paper hardcore with us, our file, and a bigger brown manila envelope, which I thought was rather strange even when I went out to Hawaii. But then I got trained in personal information security and learning about confident. First, there was interagency, national agency check, and then you'd get a confidential if you needed a confidential clearance, and then you'd go get approved for secret. And in some cases, if you're on certain commands or need-to-know basis, you get top secret. And then a lot of people have asked me about Q clearance, which a lot has to do with Department of Energy. And you can look it up. It's on the Google if you want to Google all the various levels of intelligence that you're approved for. But the reason it applies to the UFO talk is apparently there's various groups in the intelligence agency. I understand there's at least 17 now in the intelligence agency, counter for the CFR and then the intelligence agencies. And then we had the the global, what they call the military industrial complex, Pentagon, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that was Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, the Major 5. And we're going to be adding, we had NASA, we've already discussed NASA, but there's so much to know about the intelligence world. Now, how much of this has to do with UFO talk? Well, any and all or nothing, because all of them seem to have their own desire. You may want to read a book by Colonel Philip Corso, Corsoe. I believe his book is on target. I believe that Philip Corso was telling the truth. And you may see Senator Strom Thurmond's name in there. And from what I understand, Senator Thurmond, I believe, was on the inside and knew a lot and heard a lot and was trying to put the story together the same as I was, and Colonel Corso, because he was given a file cabinet in charge to find out what to do with certain pieces of a UFO that came off of some equipment from back in 47, we were told, in Roswell. And that had to do with reverse engineering, and some people believe that some things would have been discovered sooner or later, but there's not a real deep paper trail historically until we give certain companies, they were contractors, pieces of equipment that came out of that file cabinet that Colonel Corso writes about, The Day After Roswell is the name of the book. And from there, then these various companies in the military, they were contractors. I was a contractor too. I was a GS. I was in uniform, actually considered employed by the Department of, it's called DOD, Department of Defense, and then DON, Department of Navy at the time, and then later on in 87, I believe my contract was bought by the intelligence agency because of the letters I saw and received in the mail, and because I had put in for it and met the criteria for matching my husband of 20 years, which I'd like to get into about how he and I became known in the UFO business for Ronald Reagan, because after I got in and did all that I've talked about and was met at Lowry Air Force Base by this German man, later on I was very interested in trying to make sure there wasn't classified information put out, and I was told not to talk about anything or any of that to anyone. But now that I go back and look at when I was told that, that wasn't for like 10 years later. After 87, it wasn't till just about I met Tom that I'd like to talk about, Thomas R. Morris, who has also passed during the time later. And Bob Lazar's name came up during my time with him. And so I'd like to mention that December 88 through April 89 is a very interesting time, but so is 1980, December 1980. And the Rendlesham Forest happened on my birthday, December 26th. And my whole history, I'm trying to put together how I've died, had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and had various beings come into my life as either angels or extraterrestrials to put me back together again and send me back out again to do a job, whatever that, or mission or a project, or over and over. And I don't agree with all the MK Ultra and all the wild stories that are out there that people are telling, whether they're truth or not. I could care less. If they're telling them, it must be concerned about what's really going on, and forming an ACO club and how we can get to the truth about gravity, space, and time, and how it affects our reality. And my relationship, I had met President Ronald Reagan in Houston, Texas. Now, I was born in Monroe, Louisiana, and went to school all the way up to West Monroe High School, and my parents divorced, and my mother moved to Houston and married her ex-boss from Olin Matheson Corporation, Charles E. Thomas, who worked for Rice Food Markets there for Alfred Linder and Joel Levy there, and they had Mr. Levy, Mr. Rice. There literally was a Rice. That's why it was named Rice Food Markets, and Rice Epicurean later. But my sister Wendy worked there for Rice Food Markets. My daughter Angela, Don Parrish, worked for Rice Food Markets, and so it got to be a family thing there. And then Gary Finley he worked for Rice Food Markets, married Wendy, my sister, and they lived happily ever after and had a big home, golf course near my parents' home, and pecan plantation, so they had a good life. And then Gary's, they needed a chef because the Bushes shopped, interestingly enough, at the Rice Epicurean store. And so that was awful close to home because I'd met President Bush too. So it's very curious. I didn't meet, I was born in 51, so I didn't meet Truman. I didn't meet Eisenhower. And when Kennedy was shot, I knew that he was assassinated, but I think I was in the 7th grade at the time. I know I was in the 7th grade because I know I was in Mrs. Davis's room with Johnny Nichols, who started clapping at shit and shouldn't have, and had the whole room, and we didn't even know what we were clapping about because I didn't hear what was said. But we were all chastised for that, and I don't know why he did that, but I know that I was in this Mrs. Davis is West Monroe Junior High, West Monroe, Louisiana.